Welcome to your instant reaction show on a Saturday. Holy cow, Jesse Simonton. We have a lot to talk about. USC is the same team as last year. Completely suspect on defense, but thank you, Trojans, for keeping the casual college football fans interested in that game, which may keep them following the Buffaloes the rest of the year.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy that you can get a performance like what Caleb Williams delivered, where he was just that majestic. And yet, I think the takeaway from that game is just that USC remains unserious because they are unserious on defense.
Yes, and Lincoln Riley after the game says, well, there were some times we just didn't tackle. How many times do you have to see that before you do something about it?
And it's just, what's even more concerning is just that it's just they really are Swiss cheese again, because it's just so easy for opponents to just say, all right, we can just march it down the field. I mean, Colorado had that one long drive. I think it was like 15 or 16 plays where they didn't score. But other than that, it was just, all right, pitch and catch. USC can't cover a hitch. I mean, it's that simple. You can't cover a hitch. And so I think the biggest takeaway, yeah, Caleb Williams is the best player in college football. He is a cheat code, but he can't mask all their deficiencies. And I don't think at this point, for what we've seen through 5 weeks, I don't think it's going to be enough to beat either Oregon and Washington. Maybe you can pick off one. I don't think you're stopping both those offenses. Not with this Alex Grinch defense.
I mean, I don't want to go transitive property here, but we saw Oregon against this team. And they absolutely dominated them. And I just don't understand why they, like you said, they're unserious. Like, they know this is a problem. They're aware, but they don't ever do anything about it.
I mean, it's a philosophical thing. People want to immediately point to Grinch, and I do think Alex Grinch's reputation has largely been overblown for years now. But it's not just him. It is a philosophical approach in how you approach practice and how you approach spring practice and how you approach physicality in the weight room, in the off season. And so if Lincoln Riley is not going to make these changes, if he's not going to have a bloody Tuesday like what Kirby Smart's doing at Georgia, or just, literally emphasizing tackling and physicality in practice, you're going to see these results. I mean, I had the raw stats pulled up, Andy, against, again, a Colorado offense that absolutely does have some playmakers. We've seen what Shedeur can do, but they were, completely squeezed a week ago against Oregon. A week later against USC, they have 14 explosive plays, 15 passes, 8 passes over 15 yards, 6 runs over 10 yards. And this is an offense that could not run the ball against anybody.
No,
it's just, it's pathetic.
They ran for 193 yards, Colorado did. And I mean, it made no sense, especially because they were trying to come back most of the game. Like, they would have run for more if this game had been closer. I mean, thank God for USC's defense in this situation. Otherwise, I mean, the USC's offense, excuse me. Otherwise, it would have been a disaster. Great question from Jason. Are we old enough for Omarion Miller to be named after the singer Omarion? I think we are absolutely old enough. by a lot, actually, by a couple years. So yes, that is probably who he was named after. I feel so old saying that, but there
was some classic sons in this game. You had Jerry Rice's son versus Deion's son.
Yep. But I think Colorado and USC's defense did the sport a favor by making this game close, because everybody was going to be out on Colorado. Like, if that first half had just repeated itself and the final score of that game was something to the tune of 61-10, then everybody would have been out on Colorado. Nobody would have been talking about it. But now it's like, okay, like here we got this from Jesse about Colorado's clock management. Yes, it was a little head scratching, but I don't think anybody thought they had a real chance to win that game until they got down to the goal line and they're like, oh crap, we do have a chance to win this game.
Which I do wonder, a week ago, Dion's not a dummy. He specifically coached so that they didn't lose by 60 to Oregon, even though they still got blown out. They ran the ball, they punted the ball in plus territory in that game. He realized very quickly he was overmatched. They also played a little bit of the slow clock game today. And I kind of wonder in hindsight if he says, man, maybe we should have been pulling the trigger going for broke early, because again, USC's defense was there to be got, and they almost got.
But the thing about this, Jesse, they don't have to win this game, and Dion
No, they don't.
knows
I
that.
agree with that.
And so,
yes,
you're right. That probably was a tactical error, not playing that aggressively from the get-go, knowing you'd be able to gash USC's defense. But I think he will look back on it and be mad at himself. Because you're right. If they'd have come out a little more aggressively, they might have won this game, or at least it might have been tied going into the final possession. Joseph with a really interesting question. Who at USC can tell Lincoln to go get defensive help? Seems like he has the keys, 5 drinks, and no one will tell him to take an Uber. It's mind-blowing. You are a national championship team with an average, if you have an average defense. All you have to be is okay on defense. Why do you settle for sucking?
I mean, think about Joel Klatt said in the broadcast, and I don't even think he was necessarily wrong, but he said in the broadcast, 18 NFL teams basically saying 2/3 of the league would take Caleb Williams over their guy today.
Yes.
As a guy who's playing in college football, you have that guy at quarterback, and you're going to waste it. Waste it. I mean, it's remarkable. I will say last thought for me on Colorado, I think kind of leading to your point, I do think that this performance and the way they were kind of competitive in the second half should, obviously the nation's going to continue to tune in, but I think it should give Dion's team some optimism and confidence, because they get Arizona State and Stanford the next 2 weeks. Yep. And those are games you absolutely can win.
They can,
and you win those games. Exactly. I mean, you win those games and suddenly, maybe you can be competitive against UCLA. You can, we'll see what happens against a Washington State. So while the end result is obviously Dion's looking for a W, he's not, settling for, feel good coming out of a loss. I do think there should be something that they could take away with some positivity from this performance.
Zach with a nightmare scenario for the Pac-12. USC loses to Notre Dame, which certainly seems possible, splits Oregon and Washington, then upsets the Pac-12's last CFP contender in Vegas, keeping the conference out of the playoff yet again. I have a hard time believing that, because I think Oregon will get them. I think Notre Dame can get them. Now, I know that doesn't matter for the conference race, but I also, how would that defense stop Washington? How?
No, I mean, Michael, if any quarterback that's actually pushing Caleb Williams for the Heisman, it's Michael Penix. And those 3 receivers against this Swiss cheese of a secondary, no way. No way.
I just can't even imagine. But
unserious. Unserious.
All right. Speaking of unserious, one team in Lexington, Kentucky was deadly serious, and one team, well, Logan Roy would have said the same thing about Florida that he said about his kids. I think we've said this a bunch. We had Nick Delatorre on from Gators Online this past week, and he pointed out, and I agreed, that if this didn't go well, all of the positivity around Billy Napier that came from that win against Tennessee would disappear. It's gone.
And then it got worse. It's
way worse. And the thing is, this might have not gotten out of hand if Florida hadn't made a couple mistakes early. You had Graham Mertz thrown into triple coverage. That sets up Kentucky's first touchdown, that interception. And then you have Florida's going to get the ball back with a chance to tie the game, and a player tries to leap over the wall on a punt, which you can't do. I don't know if they know they can't do that, because they have an analyst running their special teams. He's called the game changer coordinator, and boy, does he change the games.
I was literally gonna come on here and have you basically like play a game where it's like, what should we rebrand the game changer coordinator for Florida? Because it has changed
Oh,
the
we don't have
game
to
for the
rebrand it at
Gators.
all.
Well, it's changed the game for the Gators multiple times this season. Two of them resulting in, just abhorrent losses. Obviously, week 1 at Utah, now week 5 here at Kentucky. Florida, I don't know if I'm sure you know this because you follow the program extremely closely like I do, Andy. They're now 1-7 away from Gainesville
Oh,
under
I got a
Napier.
better stat for you. In Florida's
Okay, go for it.
last 14 games away from the swamp, they're 1-13. So dating back to the loss at Kentucky in 2021, including bowl games, including Georgia games, any other neutral site stuff, they are 1-13 away from the swamp. At Texas A&M with everybody having the flu.
Yep, and you still have to go on. You got to go on the road to South Carolina. You play Georgia and Jacksonville. You got LSU and Tiger Stadium, Missouri away. It's not going to be easy. And this was, I think Kentucky kind of played possum. I think the first month of the season, they showed a lot of stuff today they hadn't shown yet. Ray Davis was fantastic. He had 141 yards in the first quarter. That's more than Florida had given up in a single game.
He finished with 280.
280, the fifth guy, I think, since 2000 to rush for over 200 against Florida. So he joined the likes of studs like Willis McGahee and Marcus Lattimore. I mean, it was just absurd. I mean, this was, John Schlarman would have been proud, the late, great Kentucky O-line coach, because this is the first time in a long time I think the Big Blue Wall resembled the Big Blue Wall. And they were out here just, manhandling Florida. Davis has great vision. Jesse Palmer was, complimentary about that throughout the entire broadcast. But the holes were there. I mean, he was hitting a cutback lane and then just boom, killing it. So
Davis felt like the most complete back in the country today because he could carry between the tackles. He could break tackles. He could break away. He could catch passes and make stuff happen that way. Like, he just looked incredible. He looked like Bijan Robinson out there. And it was maybe not quite as dynamic, but right up there. And the other thing that I found really impressive, you mentioned that Big Blue Wall. Kenneth Horsey didn't even play today. Their best offensive lineman didn't play. And they still did that to Florida.
They won by nearly 3 touchdowns, and their quarterback threw for 69 yards, and the receivers, I don't know, dropped 5 or 6 passes.
Y'all, the drops were horrible. They had a drop in the end zone that would have been a touchdown. They had to settle for a field goal. They had a drop on either a third or fourth down play that would have kept the drive alive. Like, they didn't play as well as they could have. Like, this could have been 51-14, Jesse. Like, it could have been horrific.
And yet it's still pretty horrific for Florida fans, I think. 33-14, you've now lost 3 straight. Stoops becomes the first Kentucky coach since Bear Bryant to beat the Gators, 3 straight times. It's going to be I think you tweeted it out. Napier got a little testy with some reporters this past week about some special team stuff. Those questions are only going to get harder coming out of this showing.
They're going to be so much worse, and they're completely justified. Completely justified. I mean, you have an analyst running special teams. You give him a bullshit name like game changer coordinator, and this is what happens. Like, you're going to get clowned for this, and you're going to get questioned about it. And the thing is, you can't say anything. You did this to yourself. Like, it's a conscious choice to have an analyst run your special teams. That is your choice.
And how about this? It was their choice to take Graham Mertz over other quarterbacks out of the transfer portal.
I don't know how much that was.
They told everybody, Andy. They've told everybody that would listen. You, me, others. We studied every quarterback in the portal, and the guy that we graded the best, all of us, me, our analyst, our quarterbacks coach, it was Graham Mertz that graded out as the best. Well, how's that looking? He's been fine. He hadn't been bad. He hadn't been what's killed you. But Florida looks like 2021 Wisconsin because they have 2021 Wisconsin's quarterback. They also basically have 2021 Wisconsin's receiver room, which again, Florida did not address out of the transfer portal. I think a lot of these freshmen are going to be great, but relying on multiple freshmen to lead you to SEC wins is just a flawed strategy. And we've seen that pay out in real time here.
Yeah, it is going to be pretty dark in Gainesville, and any goodwill from the Tennessee game is now gone. So Billy Napier better buckle up for this. Unfortunately for them, they have Vandy coming in. Unfortunately for them, they better not lose to Vandy at home.
Yeah,
because it gets late real early after that. Let's go to a place. Well, one of these teams very happy, content, won. I think the walls are starting to close in. Texas A&M beats Arkansas. They trade pick sixes early in the second half, but it never really, other than before the Texas A&M pick six that put it back, to a comfortable lead. That was the only time I ever felt like Arkansas was a threat to win this game. It felt like Texas A&M was in control most of the way.
Oh, my takeaway from this game completely, and I tweeted it out, the last 2 weeks have finally been the positive referendum and kind of the results we've been looking for from the Aggies' front seven that just has a heap of 5 stars. And so they harassed the hell out of Auburn a week ago, 7 sacks, 15 tackles for loss, and they turn around and do it a week later to KJ Jefferson, Rocket Sanders, and the boys. 7 sacks, 15 tackles for loss. Walter Nolan's out there, all over in the backfield. Shamar Turner, Shamar Stewart, McKinley Jackson. They were just killing Arkansas's offensive line. And while Max Johnson was solid and Aya Smith had a huge, punt return touchdown, to me it was the front seven. And that spinning it forward is a heck of a battle and an interesting situation, considering they got Alabama going to Texas A&M next weekend. That
matchup feels pretty good. Now we'll see Alabama against Mississippi State later tonight. We'll see how they look, but I like the way Texas A&M is going. Joseph asked an interesting question. Is the Aggie defensive line this good, or Auburn and Arkansas's offensive lines that bad? Well, LSU didn't do this to Arkansas that badly last week. I mean, Arkansas scored a bunch of points against LSU. I would say I think it means that Miami's offensive line is pretty good because they didn't let A&M get any pressure on them. I think A&M's probably got some pretty talented players up front, and Miami did a good job. Again, we'll see with Alabama, but this looks like a team that can get pressure against Alabama.
They did, and Miami's offensive line performed well in pass protection in that game. The Hurricanes could not run the ball. That was the Tyler Van Dyke show, and he took advantage of an Aggie secondary, which I do think still has some concerns, but Alabama's not going to do anything to really pressure that. I mean, it's not like they're out here throwing the ball like crazy. So I am like what I've seen from the Aggies' front seven the last 2 weeks, and conversely, I've been dead wrong about Arkansas this year. I thought they were going to be a solid team. I didn't think they were going to win 9 or 10 games, but I thought they, could get back to that 8-win category. Pittman seemed optimistic, but they're bad on offense, they're bad on defense, and they're bad on special teams.
Yeah,
and that is a recipe that's a recipe for disaster.
And now here's the other recipe at Arkansas. They have a ton of money, a ton of passion, and a ton of expectations. And that's a bad, bad recipe for Sam Pittman because
he's got that clause in his contract too.
Yeah.
He's got that clause in his contract that his buyout reduces if they don't make a bowl game.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a weird clause. He did that because he really likes his AD, and he, basically said, if I'm not winning, Hunter, you can fire me. I mean, Sam's a nice guy, but that's a tough deal.
Well, I kind of appreciate that. I kind of respect that. And Sam also knows he can go back to being one of the best offensive line coaches in the world if this doesn't work out for him. But I just, I think Arkansas is going to be like this forever. Like they have enough money to pay for anybody. They feel like they should be competitive with everybody, but it's a hard job. It's like when Brett Bielema took it. He's like, I've won the Big Ten 3 times. This will be no problem. And he gets there. He's like, oh my God, I got to play Alabama and Auburn and Texas A&M. Wait, what's going on here? So
they talked to Deion last time.
Yeah, they did. Oh my God, can you even imagine?
I don't see Deion in Fayetteville, but
he's not leaving the Louis luggage behind, because the way the transfer rules work, you got to leave the Louis luggage behind. So he's not doing that right now. Let us move before we close out to a couple more. Clemson goes up to the Carrier. Oh, it's not the Carrier Dome anymore. Whatever they're calling the Carrier Dome now, and gets right. I was very impressed with this. This is one of those, I watched Clemson last week against Florida State, and I'm just thinking, these guys are not bad. Like, just because they're 2-2 in the ACC does not mean they're a bad team. It just means they've lost to two really good teams, and now they have a chance to just show a little bit better what they can do against lesser competition. Syracuse was 4-0, but it was kind of a house built on sand. So the Clemson looked better and played about like I thought they would. It took them a bit to get rolling, but once they did, they were in control.
Yeah, I had this game as one of my picks, best bets, and I was skeptical that Syracuse was going to be able to move the ball. Without Gadsden, their top playmaker, Schrader, they're asking him to do a lot carrying the rock, as the quarterback, as their primary runner. Clemson played really well defensively against Florida State. They only allowed 3 touchdowns in regulation. Obviously, they had the pick 6 that went against them, and then you give up the score in overtime. But they still have some dudes up front defensively, and that showed well today against the Syracuse on the road. Syracuse a little bit of a paper tiger there, is 4-0. Yeah. So,
well, I think the sky is falling crowd in Clemson. I do think everything we've said about Dabo needing to go into the portal to hit some key spots is absolutely true. You can't fix that this year. If you want to decide to do that next year, yeah, you can start contending again if you want to do that, because they're not that far away. One more, a team that definitely feels like they're contending this year, Penn State and Northwestern. This was a slog for a half, 10-10 at halftime. And then Penn State has that drive in the first part of the second half where they get down to the goal line. They try the tush push twice. It doesn't work. They're 4th and goal on the 1-foot line, and they go tush push again with Drew Aller, and it works. And you're like, okay, they're going to be all right. They're going to win this thing. And they do, 41-13.
Yeah, I mean, I not too often that you have a team that has a 26-point spread tied at halftime managed to cover said spread.
Yeah,
I mean it's
pretty impressive.
That's pretty good. Yeah, I mean Drew Allard got cooking a little bit in the second half. Penn State that I think, what is it? Their big games is that in 2 weeks against Ohio State?
It's the 21st.
Okay,
is the Ohio State game. So it's going to be, that's going to be the test. But I do think Penn State is capable of playing with, having seen Ohio State in person last week. Penn State's going to be able to get pressure on Kyle McCord, which is what you've got to do, because if he has time to sit back there, he's going to pick you apart. But I do think that's definitely possible.
Yeah, I mean, and that's going to be Penn State's offensive line, I think, still needs to kind of find its footing a little bit. Maybe they did a little bit better today in the second half, but that's going to be some good on good there, because you got Ole going up against the pass rushers of Ohio State.
Olu against JT Tuimoloau. Whew, that'll be fun.
Jack Sawyer and those guys. That'll be a good matchup for sure.
Yeah, they got to. So they're off next week. Penn State is. They got a tune-up against UMass and then on to Ohio State. But that was pretty impressive. Jesse, that was a pretty impressive early window of games. Let's let folks. We do this every Sunday through Thursday night, 8 p.m. Eastern time. It premieres on YouTube. It's on demand anytime after that. It's available wherever you get your podcasts as well. So if you like the instant reaction show, there's a lot more of this all week. And there's 2 more of these today, because we're going to go watch some more football. And we're going to talk a little more about what happened. We got Georgia and Auburn playing right now. We got Texas and Kansas. And there's a lot more to go. We'll be back after the next set of games.